We continue our series of interviews with candidates for Boston City Council in the preliminary election on September 24th. Our guest is competing to succeed Mark Siomo as the councilor for Allston-Brighton's District 9. We'd like to welcome Craig Cashman. Thank you very much for being with us, Craig.
Thank you for having me.
Craig, you're one of the candidates who are a lifelong resident of the district. You went to school, you played hockey in the youth leagues. So how did you go from that to getting into politics?
Well, for me, it was my parents were always civically involved when I was a kid. My dad ran the youth hockey for a long time while I was growing up, and then I sort of took over for him more recently. And growing up, Representative Moran, who I went on to work for, was one of my hockey coaches, and that relationship sort of developed. And I was given the opportunity to go and work for him in the State House, and it was a great opportunity for me. I got to work on some campaigns prior to that as well, and so it was a great opportunity for me to go and serve my community, work with the neighbors and constituents of Allston-Brighton, and it's something that's really important to me, giving back to the community and helping people through the issues that they deal with every day.
Well, considering your work with the representative, does anything stand out as something you really enjoyed doing?
I think just the day-to-day of helping people. I mean, I think there were some really significant events. When you look at one of the very first things I worked on in the office was, when the proposed closing of the Faneuil Library. I got to be there on that day when he spoke, the rainy day in Oak Square, and hundreds of people showed up. And then I got to see on the back end of it how elected leadership works. When they put some pressure on the city to keep the libraries open through the state budget process and with some budget amendments. And so I got to see how elected leadership can take, civic advocacy and work on behalf of the community.
As an outsider driving through this neighborhood, I see these new buildings, I see the expansion of Harvard, and I said, well, these are boom times in Allston-Brighton, but how does it feel to people living in the neighborhood?
I think the change, we've always been a neighborhood of change. Growing up, we've always had development. I think right now it's a little suffocating. I think there's more than there's ever been. So what I would say to it is we just need to really take a more comprehensive approach to it, really put planning ahead of the development. Right now there's not a lot of thought when it comes to how we're planning the future of our neighborhood. A lot of the buildings are, they don't fit, what our neighborhood is. And we just need to continue to work, make sure that the community has more input, and that they have a say in how our neighborhood advances.
I know you'd like to see a more thoroughly organized planning process, but also you have some ideas about how to help people who are most at risk for being priced out of Allston-Brighton. What would that include? Yeah,
so I mean, one of the things that I would like to revisit, is having a community preference when it comes to the lottery process. When we talk about bringing the inclusionary development program up to 20%, which I do support, and we have to continue to talk about that. But the reality is with the lottery process the way it is, people are still going to be displaced even if we get to 20 or even above 20%. I know that there's issues with fair housing laws when we talk about that, but I think we really need to have a long conversation about people who have rented in our community for a long time, who've invested in the community, volunteered and given back. They should have some preference to some of those units. I'm not saying we have to do it across the board because there are people citywide that need housing and statewide that need housing, but we need to think about some of the people that have really invested in our community and put that time in.
There are some activists who want to go even higher than 20%, maybe some developers who want to stay at 13. Why 20%?
Well, I think that just right now 20% is sort of the number that a lot of people have taken and latched onto. I know the Walsh administration is looking at that, and I don't know if they'll get to 20%. I think anything we can do to get higher is something that we should be working towards. But I also think that we can put it back on the development community themselves to go above and beyond, even what the city sets. They're investing in our community, and they need to have some thought when it comes to the people who live in the community. So I'd like to see, we've seen some success with that. We've seen some of the developers go a little bit above what we ask, and I think that we just need to continue to work with them, and I think we can achieve it.
This has been in news. We're talking with Craig Cashman, candidate for City Council in Allston-Brighton's District 9. Craig, one thing you're very clear about is that you want that West Station built as soon as possible. Why is that so important, and how would you make that happen?
Yeah, well, so working in the State House, I got to work on the Boston Landing train station, and I think that opened up a lot of doors for a lot of people in our community. And there's still some work to be done on the Framingham-Worcester line. I know that they're working on that on Beacon Hill. And it's important that we make sure that there's more frequency on that line, the signaling, and we just continue to work towards it. And West Station is connected to that. I think that there's just so much potential to be unlocked from West Station. When you talk about Longwood Medical, when you talk about Kendall Square and MIT and Harvard Square and train connections, bus connections, the potential to be unlocked is significant. And certainly Harvard, I got to take part in writing a letter to Harvard and on that, DOT, making sure that they up the timetable on West Station. Harvard made a significant investment, and I think that there's other players that can get out there and make an investment too. And as we, go into this reconstruction of the highway, Allston-Brighton is going to feel the most direct impact of this. The region's going to feel impact from it, but having that transit station in place, even if it's a placemaking one, just a temporary one, and the full build-up can happen later, is going to be important for our neighborhood and certainly people coming in from the west.
I imagine people in this district want something better from the public school system. Of all the possible things, what do you think would be most important?
Well, I have a 2.5-year-old boy and a 1.5-year-old boy. And my wife is in early childhood education. She's a kindergarten teacher. So I think that, expanding what has already started with early childhood is something that we need to invest in. We know that the results are there on the back end of it when we invest, when we get people invested in the community schools. I also think that it's going to, get people to be a little more confident to take a chance at one of the public schools. Certainly, my wife and I are going to go down that path when our boys are of that age, which is next year or the year after they've sort of missed the cutoff. But getting people to be confident that there's a good K through 12 school for them in their neighborhood is something that's super important.
Thank you very much for being with us.
No problem.
Craig Cashman, candidate for City Council in Allston-Brighton's District 9.